Hello everyone, it's Pep Productions here. We are back with the February movie roundup. For those of you who don't know, I've been watching a movie every week of the year 2021 and I've been reviewing them on my Letterboxd. Link is on screen and in description below, so check that out if you're interested in following me there. And for each roundup, I take a look at all the movies I watched in a given month, and I kind of give my thoughts on them, and it gives me a chance to kind of go more in depth with it, as opposed to the review, which is kind of objective. So now that you know what it is, let's get on to doing it. This month, I watched 12 Angry Men, Knives Out, Quantum of Solace, and A Bridge Too Far. So from here on out, we'll be talking more about these movies individually. There will be timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead to a particular one, or if you want to skip past a particular one that you haven't seen yet and don't want spoilers for, because it brings me to my next point. There is in fact a spoiler warning for all four of these movies. I'm going to be talking about what I did and didn't like about them, or things that I thought were cool, and I'm not going to be pulling any punches in that regard. Some of these movies are very old, some of these movies aren't. As you saw, because I just put the years with the movie. So yeah. Anyway, 12 Angry Men came out in 1957, and it's a really simple premise. There's a jury of 12 men, and they have to decide the fate of a young man who is accused of murder. That's essentially it. That's the premise. It goes from beginning to end. The only thing that gets more and more complex is the characters' interactions and their discussions, and each of those kind of like reveals who the characters are as people, why they do what they do, why they say what they say. It's really interesting and it's really good. But before we get into that, I want to talk about why I decided to watch this movie. The whole reason that I've kind of gotten into movies, it's not like I've just loved movies for my whole life like any other person that reviews movies. I actually took a class on film over the summer last year, and the textbook for that class was Sidney Lumet's book. Is it Lumet or Lumet? I think it's Lumet, but Sidney Lumet, the director of this movie, he wrote a book talking about all of his experiences in Hollywood, and I really enjoyed seeing his perspective on things, so I was like, well, shit, I haven't seen a single one of these movies that he's talking about. I should probably do that. And the fact that this is the first movie he ever made just blows my mind, because it's just perfect. It really is perfect. The plot of the movie is a court case, but the story of the movie is more about the people that are on the jury. Like, it's telling their stories and their biases and their views on the world, and it's just really interesting how they took this one simple concept and just made it so rich and lavish. It's on Tubi, which is how I got to watching it. This movie does have ads because that's what Tubi does, but if you are interested in that, I highly recommend it. If not, you can probably find it on like Amazon or YouTube, like paid YouTube, not the free stuff. But like someplace where you can rent or buy a movie, you'll probably be able to rent or buy this. It's very good. I strongly recommend. It's such a testament to like craftsmanship in movies, just how basically good actors and a script and a camera can make such a compelling story. It's wonderful. I really love it. If you couldn't tell by all the gushing I've been doing about it, this movie definitely got a 5 out of 5 from me. Knives Out is one of those movies that I feel like I can't like describe without getting into the meat of the movie. It's kind of like this hodgepodge of like mystery, comedy, commentary. It's like all of these different things, and I think Rian Johnson does a really good job of like meshing them all together. This patriarch of a wealthy family dies, and the police think it's suicide because it very much looks like suicide, but for some strange reason, private investigator is hired to investigate it. So he has to go through and interview the family and the police and all these people. He has to figure out what happened while also figuring out why he was hired. From there, it kind of like gives us a snapshot of what the family is and who they are as people, and it ain't great. They aren't good people. They're kind of all horrid for all their different reasons, and that's very much a important part of the movie, both in the sense of like plot and theming. I've had my eye on this one for a while because it was one of the big movies that came out in 2019. You know how like there was just like a ton of movies that came out in 2019 that were all like heavily praised. This was one of them. I basically just took the best picture list and just put it onto my list of movies to see for that year. And another reason that's a little more close to modern day that I want to watch this movie in particular is that unfortunately Christopher Plummer passed away in February, and he's in this movie, so that was another reason for me to sit down and watch this. I'm glad that this was my first introduction to him because he was great in this. So as I said previously in this video, the movie is directed by Rian Johnson, and it's really interesting because the only reason I know that name is because Star Wars The Last Jedi happened. I don't really want to get into The Last Jedi, but it was interesting watching this movie, seeing similarities between his style here and his style there. I've never really like picked up on that sort of thing before, especially in blockbuster movies like Star Wars. Like the comedic timing and like the twists and turns of the plot. It was interesting to feel familiar with how a director works, because I've never really felt that before unless it was like very on the nose. Something like, oh, Adam Sandler plays the same part in every movie. But I've never noticed it subtly before, and this is like subtly similar. At least in my opinion, it's subtle. Some movie buff might stroll in here and say, oh, you're just completely wrong because he wears it on his sleeve and you're a fool for even thinking about saying something about it, and I'll just be like, it's okay. One thing I didn't like about this movie, but it's not like a huge big deal or anything, is that I kind of liked the mystery of it. The suspense of mysteries usually like starts at the beginning and builds and builds and builds, and this one doesn't really do that. It like builds for like half the movie, and then it reveals what happened. And then you have to deal with that knowledge, and the characters who have the knowledge have to deal with that knowledge. That builds and builds and builds, and then at the end of the movie, rug's pulled out from under you. It was a mystery after all, and there was something else that you had to find, and here it is. And it just kind of felt uneven, almost. I really liked the mystery part of it more. I felt like disappointed when I found out what had happened. And even then, what happened wasn't what we thought happened. It's like, oh, you thought, bruh. Like, why do we have to sit with the reveal for so long if it was just still not going to be true? I mean, I think it was just a subversion of the genre. And, I mean, the movie still worked. I still had a great time with it. I sorely missed the part where I was guessing who was to blame for the death. But, that's just me. I still think this was a great movie. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. The characters were great. The music was great. The writing, again, we've talked about the writing. This is on Amazon Prime Video, so if you want to give that a watch, that's where that is. And again, if you don't, I'm sure you can find a place to rent and or buy this. Quantum of Solace gave me quite a bit of pause. I really don't even know how to describe the plot, honestly. James Bond is doing James Bond things, and James Bond things happen to James Bond. The villain is kind of there. I mean, he's around, and there were a lot of themes in there that I felt like they were kind of tossed in there because they wanted to like explore them, and then they either didn't explore them or like they did and was kind of like half-assed. They talk about how like Bond kills a lot of people, and MI6 is like, yeah, try not to kill people, and he's like, I'll try. And then he doesn't. He just goes on killing people. There's no development on that at all. There's no, like, repercussions for him killing people. They give him a slap on the wrist, and he's like, thank you for the slap on the wrist, I'll try to do better, and then it's never talked about again. At one point in the movie, the bad guys meet with, like, the CIA. They find out that James Bond is, like, tracking the bad guy, because he's the bad guy, and they're like, oh, well, guess we gotta kill James Bond. So, like, he's being hunted by... God, I just forgot his name. I'm gonna look it up. Yes. I don't know how to pronounce that. The name of the character. He's a famous James Bond character, but he's played by Jeffrey Wright, and Jeffrey Wright has to go find Bond, but he's just like, oh, I like Bond. I'm not gonna, like, kill him, so I'm gonna work with him. But, like, I'm not gonna look like I'm working with him. After Bond meets with him, he's just like, yeah, get out of here before they kill you. He's like, thanks. And then he gets out of there and they don't kill him. I'm pretty sure they never show him again in the rest of the movie. That's just done, that's it. But the plot of governments working with the bad guy isn't, because M, like, shows up to a government meeting and they're like, hey, James Bond is kinda a loose cannon, don't you think? And she's like, yeah, I know, but he's my agent and I know he'll come home to me. And they're like, yeah, well, he needs to do that now because we're working with a villain, guess what? And she's like, but he's a villain. And they're like, but we're working with him, so rein him in or kill him. And goes to rein him in, and she's like, hey, I'm gonna rein you in. And then he's like, no. And then he escapes, and she's like, ah, okay, oh well. Yeah, I feel like there should be more repercussions for the government working with the villain. I feel like that's, like, a big deal, you know? And it didn't feel like a big deal in the movie. But all of that's kind of put into a different context, because this movie kind of continues the character arc of James Bond that was established in Casino Royale, especially with the Vesper stuff, which I was very happy to see. If you saw my January movie roundup, you'll know that I was not satisfied with the way that Vesper Lynd became a villain and then died, and that was it. That was the end of the story. That's dealt with a lot more in this movie. It's not completely handled perfectly. There are some times where it just kind of feels like, oh, we have to bring up Vesper in here because we haven't talked about her in, like, the past 15 minutes, and it's time. They do wrap it up pretty well at the end. Like, they have Bond go find her boyfriend who got kidnapped that sent her to be the bad guy, and her boyfriend was a dick, and he's just like, hey, someone I cared about died because of you, you piece of shit, so clean up your act. Also, he doesn't kill him, so, like, I just remembered that. So, like, that, good for him. I like that they continued that in the next movie. So that leads me to think that they can definitely, like, take some of these ideas that were just kind of in the movie and expand on them in the next movies. And mind you, the next movies came out 10 years ago, and I have seen them, and I don't remember them doing this, but I don't remember a lot about them anyway. I'm excited to see, like, if some of these themes that I've noticed are, like, brought up, or if they're just abruptly dropped. If you've seen them, you know. All these, like, kind of loose ends and stuff in the movie were just, like, kind of part of the problem. Again, I didn't care about the villain at all. Both of the villains. There were two villains, technically. I didn't care about that either. I did enjoy watching the movie, but, like, as soon as I turned it off and started thinking about it, it was just like, man, that wasn't that great, was it? Even if they do develop some of those ideas that I talked about into the next movies, I feel like they still should have had some semblance of an arc in this movie itself, because it is a standalone movie still. This movie didn't really do it as much for me as Casino Royale, so I gave it a 3 out of 5. It's still a good movie, still had a fun time watching it. If you like James Bond, this is a James Bond movie, so you'll probably like it. This was on Netflix, and if you don't have Netflix, you can definitely rent or buy it at your local rent and buy store. A Bridge Too Far is interesting. It's a big war epic, has a star-studded cast. I mean, I'm talking Anthony Hopkins, James Caan, Gene Hackman, Sean Connery, Michael Caine. Like, there's a lot of big names in there. And it's about World War II, which was a big war that a lot of popular movies have been made about. And I've just not once heard about this movie before. So, like, even that was cool, too. And I was like, oh, well, now I definitely have to watch this. But it was 3 hours, so I kept putting it off. But I stopped putting it off now. I have now seen it. So this movie is about Operation Market Garden. And when I went into the movie, I had no idea that this was a real thing. Because I'd never heard about it before. And I felt like I would have learned about this in history class, and I sure didn't. So I'm going to explain it here for those of you who don't know. Operation Market Garden was the Allied forces' plan to take over Holland by capturing 3 bridges that were all on the same road, and the theory was that if paratroopers could capture those bridges and hold them, the rest of the army could march up that road and take over, a significant portion of the country. However, everything that could have possibly gone wrong did go wrong for this. They did capture 2 of the bridges, and this movie mostly focuses on the 3rd bridge, which is the titular Bridge Too Far. It sure is a 3-hour-long movie, and you feel it. Like, you're sitting there like a significant amount of time has passed, and this movie does not feel like it's wrapping up at all. They tell it from a whole bunch of different perspectives, which I thought was really cool, but it also kind of took away from it just the tiniest bit, because there were so many characters to follow. He had to hyper-focus on, like, the actors themselves to be like, okay, this is a scene with Sean Connery and his crew, or this is part of the Anthony Hopkins part. It was a lot easier when it switched perspectives of like different countries. When James Caan was on screen, he was obviously American as opposed to Sean Connery, Anthony Hopkins, and all these other British people. But you got to know the characters as time went on, so like it wasn't that big of a deal. But it definitely felt like there could have been some fat cut from it. When I say fat, I mean like historical events that actually happened that this director wanted to capture. I don't know, it felt like it could have been less than 3 hours and still got the points across and like still been faithful to the events that actually happened. This movie is from the 70s, and you can tell, mostly because of the death scenes. Anytime someone dies, they have this big, over-dramatic scream. And it's a war movie, so there's a lot of deaths, so there's a lot of those screams, so it just keeps happening and happening and happening. It's a long movie, too, so it just keeps happening and happening. And by the time you're, like, an hour and a half into the movie and some guy gets shot in the head, he's like, ah! You're like, yeah, I get it. War's bad. One really cool thing, though, that I've thoroughly enjoyed about this movie is that there's these 2 parallel-ish scenes. At the beginning of the movie, when Sean Connery and his group of paratroopers land, they land next to an asylum that was recently bombed, and all of the inmates break out, and they're like coming through the trees, and they see the Allied forces, and they start laughing at them because they're crazy. Get it, guys? And Sean Connery is like, what the hell's going on? And one of his no-name officers just gives a response, and he's like, do you think they know something we don't? Kind of like a funny ha ha ha. One of those moments, and it was interesting thinking about that now that I know how poorly the operation went, and it's compounded at the end of the movie when they retreat and Sean Connery goes back to the military base, and he talks to the guy who was like in charge of planning out this operation but didn't go on the operation, and like he gets out of the car and there are these birds squawking and it sounds like laughter. It's definitely intentional because like he takes a second to look around and like listen to that before he goes inside. And I just thought that was really cool because like it like implies that like the inmates at the asylum did know something. They knew that it was gonna go bad and that they were gonna get their asses handed to them and it was gonna be super embarrassing. So like the called back to that, and like because that's exactly what happened. So overall, great movie. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. It's a really solid picture. I can't believe those words just left my mouth. If you have the time, give it a watch. I know that's not to be taken lightly, because it is 3 hours. I found it on Netflix. But also, when I was looking up some scenes for a reference while making this video, I found that the whole thing is also on YouTube. I can't speak to the legality of it being on YouTube, but it is there. So here's some similarities I found with the movies. I actually didn't write this part, so we're gonna have to wing it. Daniel Craig is a featured cast member in Knives Out, and obviously he is the star power of Quantum of Solace. It was cool to see him do a thing that wasn't James Bond, so that was nice. A Bridge Too Far and 12 Angry Men were both older movies. I did mention in the January movie roundup that I wanted to watch more older movies. Speaking of the January movie roundup, I did the thing again where I watched 4 different genres. We had like a mystery, a courtroom drama, or just a drama in general, honestly, and also like a spy action movie, and a war movie, a historical war movie. So that was interesting. Ted from the future would like you to know that I did not watch 4 different genres for the month of March, because it is kind of taxing to just watch 4 different kinds of movies, you know, just like go from thing to thing to thing to thing. It's not the biggest deal in the world, it's not like compromising or anything, but it's kind of fun to sit down and watch similar movies, you know, and see what the similarities and differences are between those. It makes this part of the video significantly easier. So now we're going to move on to a section that I meant to include last time and just didn't. This is the rank book. I'm doing a rating system that only has 10 different choices, so there are going to be movies that have the same ratings. I kind of put them in order of like which one I liked more. I'm just going to pull it up. Here it is. Like, as you can see, The Lighthouse and 12 Angry Men both got a 5 out of 5 from me. And I put 12 Angry Men above The Lighthouse because I liked it more. So that's kind of how that's going to be. Yeah, I'm not going to do that like across things. Like, if I just really decided I liked Casino Royale now, I wouldn't like put that at the top of the list or something, but like, you know, it will make more sense as time goes on, because I'll just be able to say, oh yeah, this has this rank, this has this rank. Yeah, I do want to talk about the ranks real quick. This month we had 12 Angry Men, that is at the top spot right now. And then we have Knives Out at number 3. A Bridge Too Far at number 6, and Quantum of Solace bringing out the bottom with 3 out of 5 at number 8. And that's the video. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen any of these movies, or if you want to see any of these movies. Or if you've seen movies that I didn't talk about that you would like to talk about, feel free to do that in the comments below. Also, if you like what I'm doing here and you want to give me a subscribe on YouTube, that would be lovely. It would help me out a great deal. I'm also on Letterboxd, as I've mentioned before. The link is still in the description below. I'm also on Twitch and Twitter and TikTok and Patreon and Fiverr. All those links are also in the description. Why is that relevant to the video? A lot of those links are new, I guess, so go check them out. Give me some love. I demand your love. Bye. The way that I'm shooting right now, I'm wearing a distinctly purple shirt, and you guys can see that I'm wearing a purple shirt, but I can't see that on the screen. I don't know what's going on, but it just comes off as like completely navy blue. Like, I'm gonna share some unedited footage so that you can see what I'm seeing on my monitor. It's wild, right? Like, this is just the wrong color.